Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going on a seriously fascinating journey. We're going to look at how one simple, but absolutely profound, shift in how we view our own thoughts scales across human history. We're talking about a concept that started all the way back in ancient monasteries and has traveled right into the high-stakes world of modern corporate boardrooms. Let's get into it. Okay, picture this. You wake up in the morning, you grab your phone, and you see a short, flat text message from someone you care deeply about. Just the letter K and a period. Boom. Instantly, your stomach drops, right? Within seconds, your brain just decides they are furious with you. You frantically run through everything you might have done wrong over the past week, basically inventing a complete worst-case scenario. But then, when they finally reply an hour later, totally cheerful and unremarkable, you realize something crazy. You just spent 60 minutes living inside a terrifying story that your own mind wrote without even asking you first. So what does this all mean? Why exactly does our brain do that? Well, that invisible gap, the space between what actually happened and the story you told yourself about what happened, is where a man named Aaron Beck spent his entire career. And Beck made a foundational discovery that literally changed psychology forever. He realized that the story we tell ourselves always happens before the feeling actually arrives.
Section 1. The Thought Before the Feeling. Aaron Beck's Revelation.
So Beck trained as a traditional Freudian, meaning he expected to find that depression was caused by buried, unconscious anger, usually hidden deep in a patient's dreams. But, the data just refused to cooperate. Instead of finding buried rage on the analytic couch, Beck found something highly visible and honestly pretty mundane happening in real time. He saw streams of incredibly fast, negative, self-critical thoughts. Beck actually coined a term for these. He called them automatic thoughts. And these are basically habitual, self-critical thoughts that fire off so rapidly in the mind right before negative emotion is felt that people barely even notice them happening. Like a patient would report feeling sad, and Beck would ask what just went through their mind seconds prior. It was almost always a thought like, I ruin everything. To actively catch these thoughts in the act, Beck completely changed the dynamic of therapy. He literally moved his patients off the couch and into chairs facing him just so they could work together to intercept these thoughts in real time, a real game changer. And as he did this, he noticed these thoughts weren't just random. They clustered together into what Beck called the cognitive triad. He found that depressed patients suffered from negative beliefs about themselves, negative beliefs about the world, and negative beliefs about the future. We're not just talking about occasional bad thoughts passing through your head here. This is a collapsed structure of conviction that fundamentally drives depression. The engine driving all of this is a self-feeding loop. Imagine you have a thought that you're going to bomb an upcoming presentation. Well, that thought instantly creates a feeling, right? Anxiety. Then that feeling of anxiety causes a behavior. Maybe you avoid practicing, or you just cancel at the last minute. And of course, that behavior produces a terrible outcome, which firmly confirms your very first thought. The loop just closes on itself, getting stronger and stronger every single time it runs. But here's the brilliant part. Beck realized you could interrupt this loop right at the source, the thought itself. He developed something called cognitive restructuring. Instead of trying to suppress a thought, you treat it like a scientific hypothesis, rather than an ultimate truth. You simply stop and ask, okay, what is the actual evidence for this thought? You learn to actually notice you're having a thought instead of just blindly living inside of it. Section 2. Monks and Ancient Mind Hacks, the historical roots of CBT. Now get ready because we're going to make a massive historical pivot here. This psychological tool for hacking your own mind, it's actually thousands of years old. We can start all the way back in the 1st century with the Stoic philosophers, Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, who famously argued that we're disturbed by our judgments of events, not the events themselves. Then we move to the 4th century Egyptian desert with Evagrius Ponticus. Fast forward to the 16th century, and Ignatius of Loyola formalized the examen, a daily practice of reviewing your thoughts, all the way up to Aaron Beck in the 1970s. This continuous historical line of mind hacking runs directly through philosophy and monasticism, right into Beck's consulting room. How wild is that? Let's look a bit closer at that 4th century Egyptian monk, Evagrius Ponticus. This guy spent years observing his own mind with the exact precision of a modern therapist. He defined something he called a logosmos. Basically, this is an early thought that attaches to a craving, which, if left unexamined, escalates into a feeling and then ultimately an act. Evagrius wasn't just writing theology up in the clouds, he was creating a practical, working diagnostic system to catch thoughts early enough to stop them before they turned into bad decisions.
Evagrius even cataloged these logosmos into 8 specific recurring patterns. Now, here's a fun fact. Centuries later, Pope Gregory the Great would actually rework these into what we now know as these 7 deadly sins, which mostly just hardened into a list of abstract vices over time. But it's absolutely vital to understand that they started as a highly precise, structured cognitive checklist for monks to interrupt their own distorted thoughts.
Section 3. Automatic thoughts at work. Scaling to the office.
So what happens when these automatic thoughts scale up from a monk's quiet cell or a therapist's chair and enter a modern corporate office? Well, psychologist Stephen Palmer pioneered cognitive behavioral coaching for the workplace. He recognized that an organization doesn't just have a single mind, it has shared stories. Think about it. Clinical catastrophizing scales up into a leadership team treating one disappointing financial quarter as a total failure of their entire strategy. All-or-nothing thinking becomes a culture where a single mistake is taken as undisputed proof that an employee is fundamentally unreliable. And mind reading, that turns into a team assuming they know a stakeholder's reaction and planning around it without ever actually asking them. Unexamined individual distortions easily spread like wildfire and become the undisputed reality of an entire company. Section 4. The leader's inner monologue. Leaky thoughts. This dynamic is absolutely critical at the very top. Why? Because a leader's private, automatic thoughts do not stay private. They leak out. Let's say a leader carries this unexamined automatic thought, if I show uncertainty, people will lose confidence in me. Because of that fear, they hide what they don't know. Consequently, the team looks at that and learns that uncertainty is something shameful to hide, rather than a puzzle they can solve together. The leader's unexamined fear literally creates a toxic, self-fulfilling loop that everyone else has to live inside of. Researchers simply call this loop culture.
So how on earth do modern organizations fix this? They use executive coaching drawn explicitly from Aaron Beck's CBT frameworks. The process is remarkably straightforward. Step 1, you don't just correct the behavior, you find the hidden belief underneath the behavior. Step 2, you test that belief against actual evidence, just like a scientist. And step 3, you shift the cognition to ultimately shift the culture. We're literally taking the revolutionary therapy techniques of the 1970s and placing them directly into today's leadership offsites to fix broken cultures right at their root. So, the crucial point to take away from all this is simply this. The mind constantly interprets, and we routinely mistake that interpretation for the event itself. Think all the way back to the beginning of our explainer. That flat K text message? It never actually meant anything on its own. Just like a quarterly financial loss doesn't come preloaded with a verdict on the company's future. Our minds run these patterns fast and quietly, and honestly, we rarely stop to check them.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly empowering realization. The thought is not the fact. Whether you're a monk in the 4th century desert, a patient in a 1970s clinic, or a CEO in a modern boardroom, the solution is exactly the same. Your thoughts are just hypotheses. So, the next time your mind writes a tragic story without your permission, I want to leave you with this question. Will you check the evidence? Thanks so much for joining me to explore this fascinating topic today.